Hi, Ian. So, Ian, you are in Santa Fe, correct?
Santa Fe, exactly. Yep.
Okay, so this is Ian Derer, our General Director at the Dallas Opera, a friend for many years. And I met Ian, I think I met Ian, we probably crossed paths at the Washington Opera on stage at one point. Then we worked a lot in Chicago together. That's where we became friends. Then we worked together. So in Chicago, and we are going to talk about this probably in details, you were dealing with scheduling and programming and dealing with artists, easy and difficult. And I was very often in Ian's office having long conversations because I was one of the easy artists.
That's right.
And then I met Ian. We worked together in Santa Fe, where you were a rehearsal director, coordinator, and that kind of things. And then you became artistic administrator for the Dallas Opera. And then for many years, and when I was already at the Dallas Opera, and then you became general director of the Louisville Opera.
Kentucky Opera, yeah, in Louisville.
Opera in Louisville. And then you came back gloriously as the general director of the Dallas Opera. And the Dallas community absolutely adores you. And you have brought a lot of energy and strengths, and at the same time calm to the company. That is until that virus hit the United States, Texas, and the arts community all over the world very hard. How, this is a very broad question, which are the most difficult to answer in general, but how did you leave this COVID episode, this virus? How do you live it? And what do you think is in for us in the next months, in the next years?
That is a big, broad question, but as a general director, I can be very general if I need to.
Please.
I think a couple of things. I'm living it right now in obviously we all are at Dallas Opera. We're still working remotely. And we have not been back to the offices since we shut the offices in the middle of March in conjunction with the pandemic. So in a way, we as a company are functioning in a completely different manner by necessity, like everybody else is. And the question is, when do you return to the offices? And that's a question that I weigh every day. And I certainly had anticipated probably 2 months ago that we'd be back in the offices in August, but that didn't seem to be a prudent choice. And so now we're reevaluating what the next steps are going to be. But I think that to go back to your initial question, how do you live it? I mean, there are so many questions that hit you right away. And I had to literally distill those down to a few essential things. And the most essential thing was, what is the safest approach? And I looked through that lens through everything. And as you know, we don't have a small endeavoring in the opera world. You can have chamber pieces that are small in scale, small in scope, but it actually takes an enormous amount of people to do even the most small scale things because of the complexity of it. And opera is complex. Opera is often a problem that is specific to itself. So that level of complexity means there's that many more pitfalls for safety. And it was just one of those things that I knew that if I couldn't really look at it and think this is a safe move for not only those that are participating, those that are making it happen, and those that are going to come try to see it, we needed to pause and we needed to wait until a time was more safe.
Right. So, but I must say, the Dallas Opera as a company and you as a general director uh, called the shot quite early on what was the right approach to this. And I think we were with the Met, the first company to announce that we were going to cancel the fall with the Metropolitan Opera. And it was the right call. And I think it was the right moment to make that call because that allowed the whole company to really prepare in a better way the weeks ahead, the months ahead, um, and to actually, minimize the cost because the earlier you cancel, the less it costs, and to be able to reschedule um, in the spring of 21, which is what we did. Um, Being a general director is a wonderful job. I mean, you get to do an art form that's dying. You have no money to do it. You are dealing with people in the industry who are living 30 to 100 years backwards and who didn't get the memo. You have an audience that is wonderful, but that is not the youngest. And now you have an epidemic. How do you feel about all of this?
Well, we all love a challenge. What can I say? We all love a challenge. Um, pre-pandemic, opera had, as you said, significant challenges on every front, but it always has, and those fronts have moved and changed. And one decade maybe it's funding, one decade maybe it's another thing. But the thing is that it has always had challenges and it's always adapted. And I think that that's one of the things that the pandemic has really just put the pedal to the metal to really facilitate and accelerate any looking ahead to what changes need to happen in the art form. And we've been dealing with that on some level, a very small level, for years and years and years. If you look at it in the terms of new subscribers and faithful subscribers for years and years. And you've had this pull to appeal to new generations through new ways, but yet you have to maintain your relationships with the older generations in ways that they're accustomed to as well. So you've had to kind of split your focus to draw new audiences while you're maintaining your current ones. And this is a hyper version of that. And we now are really propelled to look at opera, I think, in two tracks from here going on. I think we will always have a traditional track, as we just call it for simplicity, but we'll also have a digital track. And that is so now an important part of opera companies that probably didn't even envision that they had the resources to be able to do it, are suddenly figuring out ways to do it. Not everyone can do it at the same level of production or resources, but they're doing it. And that's really inspiring for an art form to just see everybody just figure out a way to make a leap one way to another. So I think it's part of the challenge. I mean, right now, it's kind of like you think back to the development of operas. I'm thinking Menotti and Amal and the Night Visitors, for example, something that was composed for the television initially, and then later became a part of the stage repertoire. We need to be thinking in those ways too, thinking in terms of creating for the digital stage that can always be interpreted on the stage later as a part of the next generation of opera too.
Right. So I mean, this is the bragging moment because TDO Network, which was created by the company under, let's give him the credit, a lot of vision for this, if not all of it, came from David Lomeli, who is our director of administration. And I think you and I get credit because we let David, really push this and develop this. And David is a friend and he's an extremely creative and imaginative friend. And so we both understood this was something that was absolutely key to one, showing that we were not idle and sleeping, and two, answering earlier than needed, but with absolutely a knife under our throat, to the conundrum of the connection between the stage and the screen.
Yeah. I mean, come on, you and I had the easiest job with that. We just simply had to say yes. I mean,
Yes.
it
Well,
was.
it's easier to say no in general, and
It's true.
it's easier for the music director to say, I want this, and if I don't have this, and the easy answer for the general director is usually no, no, no to everything. I mean, and you were right on board with this, and again, thanks to David, imagination, leadership, and then the rest of the team and the support of the board and the whole team. I mean, TDO Network became, in terms of presence of line, one of the two first companies in the US and in the world, one of the three first companies in the world in terms of presence online, which is very important. The big question, the big conundrum, the catch-22, the winning thing is, how does the screen connect with the stage in terms of fundraising, in terms of reaching to know community, and in terms of artistic creation, which is what you were referring to with the reference to Amal and the Night Visitors of Menotti and TV, and what is going to be the equivalent of that between the digital screen and the stage. Do you think that when we are out of the virus, this is still going to be as relevant? How much of it is going to be relevant? And where does specifically the Dallas Opera stand with this?
I'm really excited about how the digital product, whatever that product is, can enhance the stage product. And I think that that's one of the things. Right now, we're looking at months where we're having to substitute. But I think that the next step is that the actual digital product will be something that dovetails with the physical product. And I mean, we see that in some extent now, the way you look at a simulcast or an HD broadcast that has digital content that leads you into that, or that teases that event coming up in your schedule, all of those kinds of things. But we have opportunities to do similar things with events for donors, with educational opportunities throughout the community. Mm-hmm. And we've been thinking in terms of appealing to our community in a geographic area by nature, as most people do. But there's no reason that we now shouldn't be looking at our community. Those that are interested in the product are interested in what we're doing to customize that for Dallas audiences as well. So I think that the digital product, it's the possibilities are pretty limitless, and it's just amount of creativity that you want to add to it, who you want to cater to, and who you want to attract. And once you start identifying those things, it's an opportunity for us to use as much creativity in the development process of a new work or new opera as in how to attract new audiences, knowing that we're not necessarily trying to pull just the people from the 12 miles radius of Dallas.
Right. And also we are reaching to other demographic, we are reaching to other age, and when I say reaching, I think that's one of the lessons of the last weeks, mm-hmm. especially also not only because of the fact we are working remotely, but also because of the events which are connected to the virus. It's not only that we're reaching to different community, but that's also we are listening to different communities. And that there is all of a sudden an exchange and something that can inform us in order to change as an organization and being more in tune with different pockets of potential audiences that we are going to attract in the concert hall. How
that's really interesting, because I think, Emmanuel, I just want to touch back on that for a second, because what the dialogue is two ways then, is what you're saying. And we're learning from those that are watching what we do and participating and interacting with us. And the other part of the digital world is that, in you and I know that operas take a long time to plan, and in a lot of ways, they lock you into things years in advance so that you don't feel like you can respond as nimbly to the things that are maybe the most current things. The digital world, the digital product, the way that you are designing something for the future gives you a lot more flexibility and nimbleness to respond to things in a much more timely fashion. And so if we're getting feedback from a whole new community about the way that this is being interpreted, or an opportunity for us to speak on certain topics or develop an opera on certain topics, the digital world is a lot more accessible and amenable for us to create something new in a hurry, as opposed to having to go through our traditional aspects.
Right, right. So there is an acceleration of
and that's exciting. Opera hasn't had that kind of responsiveness naturally.
Right, right, right. Absolutely. And so, in order to let's go back to the solitude of the general director. And I don't think anything can prepare you to this. And it's the same thing, as a music director, and with variation, and also in Prague, I have responsibilities that are very close to the general director too. And so I totally feel this. Nothing really prepares you to that. And there is a change really in the way you deal with issues and the way you see the profession when you arrive to that level of accountability, responsibility. You were trained as a singer, then you also trained in arts administration. When did you think, and why did you think that maybe you should be an art administrator? And when did you think, if you did, that you wanted to be a general director of an opera company, despite of all you knew already was very complicated and challenging in that position?
Well, I think until you've sat in the seat, you probably have a degree of naivete on any position, right? I mean, the transition to artistic administrator seemed, or in the artistic realm, seemed a lot more natural to me, because I had I had a background as a singer, but I worked in production as a stage manager and AD and all that kind of stuff too. I loved it, but I really came quickly to the realization that I liked opera much better than any of the one parts of it. And I realized that I was in a position where that was relatively rare to find somebody that had done all the various jobs that I had done. Getting to a general director, I think, was a little bit of a harder leap, mainly because I was very happy with what I was doing artistically and all these things. And it took some prodding of some key and influential people in my life to open up and say, you have the potential for this. And I think that the potential probably was seen because of, maybe it's a degree of diplomacy, but also it's a degree of nuts and bolts knowledge of the art form. And when you have those two things, and I didn't think I was diplomatic at all. And I think that was really probably something that you saw as a conductor, is that as a rehearsal administrator, in Chicago, particularly in Santa Fe, you had to go and you have to broker deals with everybody to make sure that you get everyone's relatively happy, or at least isn't so angry that they're not going to do the rehearsal, and you can actually get something achieved, even though not everybody can always have what they want. So there was that degree of diplomacy you have to have. And I think that translates to some extent with board relationships too. And that allowed me to kind of see that, all right, I'm having to use that whole skill set, which was relatively new to me or foreign to me, as I was, I was very comfortable knowing what it takes to put an opera together, but not necessarily so knowledgeable about the other aspects of governance. And so big learning curves there for me, but I don't think that I would have naturally graduated to that position had, like I said, a few people said it.
Yeah, so let me tell you that, and the people who are listening, that in terms of, and actually, I don't think diplomacy is the right word. I think it's an understanding of the stakes with a respect for the people and a way to finding solutions that would not offend either reality or personalities. And you were absolutely superb at this. And I would say what makes a great general director is his personality before his skills. The skills can be learned and developed. They are very important, but that personality is the key and the essence of what a general director is, associated with a vision, and a vision that is connected to the very block, the very city in which you live, and the very people that are that community. Of course, as you said today, that community is getting a little enhanced and modified by the fact we are also online, and but there too, this ability to listen to people, to integrate what is coming back to you. I think this is what makes a great general director, and that's why you are in that seat, and that's why everybody loves you in that seat. I want to go back though, because we never really talked about this, but because that's part, there is something very creative about casting. There is something very creative about programming a season. There is something very creative about putting together a team and getting the best out of people and trying to rearrange things. There is something incredibly artistic in getting a board energized. And I really believe that. But as an artist, you were first a singer. So what kind of, which is, you're supposed to be an artist if you are a singer. So what kind of singer were you? What are the roles you were studying? Who were your idols? What did you think you could sing?
Oh, I mean, the role I sang a variety of roles. I mean, and they were all in college.
Were you a haute compte? Were you a sopranist? Were you a bass? Were you a tenor?
Was a bass baritone. I sang Giovanni, Nick Shadow, Skiki. I'll try to think. Lucia, I sang Enrico in that a little bit too. But I really, I knew in my heart of hearts that my voice was what it was. I think I had made an assessment at some point. I think, you know what, you could probably be a very good, dependable B-level singer. You had a good voice, not really a big voice, but you good artistic, all languages, all that I loved. But I really thought, I don't know whether I want to have a career at that level. What is it that I really want to do? And to be honest, I was equally interested in directing. I was equally interested in technical aspects of things. So it wasn't like the artistic thing pulled me so much that I felt like I had to do it. I felt like there were other options. But as a singer, I was greatly influenced by a few particular voices. And my father had a pretty robust opera collection, and through a family connection, we had somebody that was connected to George London and served, or was in Europe with him during the war. And my father's cousin, I guess, ran a radio station, American radio station in Europe. And so brought back all these albums, all these incredible recordings that ended up in my father's collection. And so I grew up spending countless hours listening to opera, and particularly anything that George London ever recorded. So that's where it started. So that was a voice I loved. And then you follow that career and you see the beauty and the tragedy associated with his life, and then what happened with him later in his career, and then how that greatly influenced so much of what became Opera America. I mean, it was an interesting story altogether. But that voice is still one that I go back to for sheer power and magnitude and dramatic elements. But there are so many other voices that I particularly am drawn to. Baritone-wise, I could bore you to death. Bastianini, I mean Capocilli, all these guys. But for me, a few.
Okay, so a fairy could have given you the vocal cords to sing any fach, any kind of role.
Yeah.
Or, 2 months. What would have what would have you asked the fairy to give you?
Oh, I think Wagnerian baritone helped me.
I was going to say, I knew you Wotan
yeah,
so
yeah.
in which one in those?
I mean, Valkyra is. I mean, come on, that's one of the greatest opportunities for any singer. But I mean, I adore Dutchman too. I mean, I really, and your Dutchman was particularly exciting. So I loved that. That kind of put me on a memory lane of listening to London sing that with on that famous. It was him and Leonie Resnick and Antal Dorati, I think was it.
So how do you feel? I mean, as a general director, you have absolutely. I mean, the schedule is brutal, and I guess it's even more brutal now, paradoxically, that we're not producing because you have to deal with so many issues, and you and I.
Well, that's the truth. I mean, you and I have said. I mean, the only thing busier than producing opera is apparently not producing opera.
Yeah. Exactly, especially if you want to be good at it,
Yeah.
So you are unbelievably busy. But when you are, let's say, in a rehearsal or in a performance, how do you leave that performance as a general director, as a singer, as an audience? I mean, what are your feelings?
Oh, well, I mean, it's a mix of all that. I mean, first of all, I'm leaving it thinking, how was the actual performance? And not only am I thinking of the performing that everyone did and the orchestra, chorus, everybody together, but I also am super hyper focused on, did the curtain come in right? How were these lighting cues? All of the technical aspects as well. How was the actual product? But then, you leave your seat and then you think, how many people showed up? How many people that had tickets showed up? All of these things. What was the weather like? Was that a factor in this?
Did anybody die?
Yeah. Did anybody die? Did anybody get hurt? These are all big things like that. Then you start also thinking, who was here tonight that needs to be acknowledged? Did we acknowledge the people correctly? Did we take people backstage that needed to be introduced to folks? And how did we engage people that were coming to the opera for the very first time? Did we do our job there? We've, not only is it the relationships that we've had, but who came to the opera for the first time and what was their experience and how did we reach out to them? It's a real mix of feeling like you have to, without pause, be able to identify and talk to any individual who you go backstage and check in with them on their personal performance, but then you have to gauge what someone's experience was on the way out.
Right. And so you are absolutely.
How many drinks were served? How were they drinking tonight?
And when,
And when? Yeah.
Yeah. You are absolutely great at supporting the artist. I think our donors love you and at every level. And all of this is very natural to you. Still, what was your biggest surprise when you became general director in Louisville and then at the Dallas Opera? What is it about this role that nobody told you about or that you did not knew was there before?
Well, I think it's not that I didn't know it was there. It's just that I had never had the opportunity to live with it. And so when I was growing up and experiencing opera, I was very lucky to be doing it at a very high level in some great companies with some great conductors. So you're operating at a really high level in that bubble. and call that artistic and production bubble for the time being.
Mm-hmm.
That simultaneously happens in all these other departments. My career was rather siloed in one side of operations for a long time. And I think that that's one of the things that I'm learning, that I learned in Kentucky, that I learned here too, is that to really see those artisans in marketing and development, really how
Mm-hmm.
they are as important, if not more important in a lot of ways than the artistic and production aspects of it. And I am the first to admit that that was not my training, it was not my level of expertise. But the more and more I see great levels of skill, what people can do, and how they take what you make as a conductor and what we make as an artistic product and turn that into something that is a marketing tool or another way to actually talk to, I mean, that's an art form on itself too. And to me, that's where I'm still growing. That's where I'm still learning how those skills that are so integral to the success of a company, not only through marketing and development, but also IT. These things that I really was quite distanced from early on in my career, they are the driving fundamentals of, or foundational blocks of certainly the opera company now and what it is going to be in the future too.
Right. So one dimension you're talking about, so there is artistic, there is production, and there is donors relationship. There is also the board relationship. And this is something usually people are not prepared to unless they really get into those positions of responsibility. We have an amazing board. We have quite a board of different, horizon and so on. What do you do? It's a little of a trick question, but what do you do if there is a board member that all of a sudden is maybe trying to push you into doing some repertoire, or is telling you, I think you should not have done that piece. I think that staging is too aggressive to my taste, or not aggressive enough to my taste. I feel there is a political agenda in that production and I don't like it. How do you manage all of this? What's your position with this?
Well, it's an opinion, and the board is made up of people, and there for every opinion that is mentioned that is counter to mine, there's someone that is certainly in agreement or feels the other way too. And I think you can't get really too hung up on those things. I think you have to hear people. You have to understand their perspective. And it's my responsibility to not only hear what they have to say, but I think to dig deeper and understand why they feel that way. And if you do truly understand, you may be able to offer a counter that shows another perspective, but you might also just have to say, we disagree, and that is absolutely 100% okay. And you hope that you don't disagree too much, but you really hope that you have board members that are okay with disagreeing too. And I feel very, very comfortable with our board, and I think that we have such a wonderful array of people that have different strengths and passions and loves. I mean, there are individuals on our boards that really are amazing with their knowledge of opera, as you know, Emmanuel, and other people that are coming to the table without a robust knowledge of the operatic repertoire and canon and singers and all of that, but come to it for a love of theater, a love of spectacle, or a love of just singing. And once you understand what brings somebody to the opera house, you have to expect that they're going to have an opinion about it. And that's okay.
Right. And I totally agree with you. And we actually have a board politically, you have people who are more left, people who are more
Sure.
right. You have people who are more conservative on social issues and less conservative on social issues. But even the ones who say, well, that was a little tough for my taste, they usually really, also support what we are doing. Uh, the, the
The
country,
other thing,
yeah,
just to clarify, one of the interesting things I think is that, 9.9 times out of 10, the issue is over the physical production or the staging.
correct.
And one of the things that we're very good about, and I'm cognizant of, and you are too, is that we'll give them the wiggle room to be able to talk about this, to debate these things. But one of the things that is almost never negotiable is the quality of singers we put on stage and the quality of music created from the pit. And that's something that I think that we're always really, really, really careful of. And it served us well.
Right. Absolutely. On the other hand, I think it's very hard to, especially nowadays, with all over the world, questions that are very fundamental of politics in a very general sense of the word politics.
Mm-hmm.
That is the police. It's what it means to be together in a city. An opera company, a symphony, a theater company, a ballet cannot pretend to be totally outside of those questions and those issues. The unrest in the country, in the US right now, is something that you cannot just put, a screen in front and pretend it doesn't exist. On the other hand, your political opinions, my political opinions are probably irrelevant. But if we don't provide a forum for people to start having a discussion on what it means to be together, is opera relevant today or not, and to show this with a product on stage, I think we are also failing. How do you reconcile this? The necessity of providing entertainment, a certain respite from the hardship of what's happening in the world today, and the fact that if we totally ignore society, if we ignore communities or what is happening, including what is very problematic, what is controversial, then we're also going to die. How do you reconcile those various aspects?
I think the answer is that if you look through the history of opera, there have always been operas that are certainly designed with a subject matter that is, maybe mythologically based or fantasy, all of these things. But then you've got a handful of operas, and I think that number has increased through the length of opera, of subject matter that is really tied to relevance of the day. And that is something that we as an opera company can and should be doing more of, is tying to the relevant topics. Now, the greatest challenge, as we were talking earlier, is that you plan in advance. And so what you're talking about may have been relevant 10 years ago or 5 years ago, but it may not be relevant to the things that are happening right now. And I think that this is kind of one of those incredible moments in the history of the performing arts where the ability to be responsive via social media without having to mount an entire opera or create something that is smaller on scale, but yet responds to any degrees of issues that are coming up today, whether they be immigration or racial inequality or Black Lives Matter, all of these things. What can we do now? And I think that's the beautiful part about the future, is that we have the ability to really maintain a traditional product to some extent, but also engage and develop a new level of engagement with communities that it's the here and the now. And that's a subject matter that is of great discussion with us internally right now, obviously, but also in other performing arts institutions as well. And I think that that's part of not only what is beautiful about tomorrow, but I think it's expected and responsible for us to think about that.
Very excellent answer. It's good. And a topic that is endless, a topic that is difficult, and certainly we don't pretend to have all the answers, but at least we are not putting the questions under the carpet. And I think that's the most important thing. And you have been absolutely wonderful for this, and so has our staff and our board. We're arriving close to the end. I want to ask you a question I've never asked you. If you would not have worked in the beautiful world of opera and entertainment in general, what profession would have you embraced?
That's a great question. I ask myself that occasionally, and I think, what would I do? What would I do? And there are two things that always I seem to come back to, and I don't know that these offer a real true occupation, but they are things that I love to do. And one of them is cooking, and the other is gardening. And I also, for a fleeting second in my youth, thought I'd like to be an architect. So
an architect. Okay.
Architect, yeah. But I could absolutely see that I would be involved with food in some way, but also particularly, I don't know whether it's a restaurant owner, but connected to people. I love people. I love sharing stories. I love listening to people. And I love sharing an experience that is created then. And that's why I like opera. I like music. It's then, and you're responding to what the hell you just did, as opposed to other things. And cooking is, for better or for worse, a lot of that same thing. And I know I can't make a sauce like you, because we've proven that before.
You're a great cook. I just gave you a tip on the sauce, you know.
And it made all the difference. And I still use that technique. I mean, the French.
Right.
Well, they know a sauce.
Yeah. Usually people who like opera actually do like to cook and to eat, and there is some kind of connection there. Ian, it's great. I'm so happy. You know, I've done a lot of these talks, and I've talked a lot with singers. You know, I love singers, but it's always refreshing for me to talk to people who do something else than singing. We love you in Dallas. This industry absolutely adores you. Thank you for the time. It's tough. It's tough for all of us. But we need the arts. We need music. We need opera. And we're trying our best to not only convey that relevance, but still make it alive and connecting with our times, as challenging as they are. And for this, you are an amazing partner. So,
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the fact that you have the facility to be able to talk to just about any type of person in the art form and outside the art form and relate, which is an unbelievable skill. But you also, you're so heartfelt, and it is a pleasure to work with you. And I know that opera may not be clear in the minds of all of us yet on what the future is and how the future is going to develop. But I know I get a great deal of sleep knowing that you're my partner with this. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ian. Be careful in Santa Fe with the cacti and the margaritas. And
thank you. Coyotes and snakes, don't forget those.
Coyotes and snakes. And if you finally find that ocean I've been looking for there, you just let me know and I will come in a split second.
I will.
And I think we should have a little thought for our friend Edgar Daniels, as you are in Santa Fe. Edgar was an actor. Edgar was an incredible supporter of the arts, and he helped the Dallas Opera. He helped with Thérèse Raquin. But also he was a great supporter of the Santa Fe Opera, and Daniel passed away a few days ago, and he will be surely missed. He was part of, the history, the incredible history of Santa Fe, with all the, let's say, the Baroque aspect from every point of view, especially the social one of the Santa Fe Opera in its past.
It was a incredible figure here, and I know that the legacy is great as it is now, but the void that he leaves us with right now is pretty significant.
Right. So we have a loving thought to Edgar, and thank you so much for your time, Ian. And we're going to stop the recording, but we're still going to actually work as soon as we're done with this. So hang on. Ciao. Bye, everybody. Thank you. Ciao.